So, welcome to the Animal Communication End of Life and Holistic Healing Conference. I'm Dr. Jeff Drognet. I'm your host. And with me is Nancy Windheart. And Nancy is an internationally recognized animal communicator and also interspecies communication teacher. Her work has been featured in television, radio, magazine, online media, lots of stuff, and also in digital and print publications. Print publications. I used to write for print publications, but they're gone. They're gone now. She teaches courses and training programs in interspecies communication and Reiki for all species for both lay people and those who wish to practice professionally, and provides animal communication consultations and professional animal communication and Reiki mentoring for clients worldwide. Nancy lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, USA, with her animal family of dogs, cats, and chickens. There we go. So we got a whole menagerie there. So welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, with that introduction, we're talking about animal communication and we're talking about Reiki. And of course, the topic is end of life. So tell me, how can that work in that scenario? What are we trying to do?
Well, first let's talk about the animal communication piece. And I'm going to, for the purposes of what I'm about to say, assume that the people who are attending this conference have a basic fundamental understanding of what animal communication is. We're talking about telepathic animal communication and really that universal language where we can understand our animal friends. And so when we're thinking about end of life, and all of the things that go into that, communication can be so important for really helping us to strengthen our partnership with our companion animals and to remember and to recognize that they can be participants in that process, even though they are also the ones who are experiencing the end of life in, whatever way that that's unfolding for them. But participants, both in terms of helping us to, and communicating to us their preferences, their requests, their wishes about their care, treatment decisions, uh, all of that kind of thing. And also allowing us to have a two-way conversation with them about what's happening and about, the decisions, the choices that we may be needing to make as the human person who's responsible for their care, but also to facilitate having that time as much as possible. And there are some circumstances where we don't get the time, right? And we can talk about that in a little bit. But, to be able to say what we want to say to each other and to facilitate as much as possible, having our animals be in equal partnership with us as they're going through the end of life. So that's on the communication aspect, which I think we'll be talking about primarily today. But, also just to put a little bit of emphasis also with Reiki, which is a particular form of energy healing that can be very helpful for animals and their people at the end of life and can really help to support that process in a very peaceful and healing kind of way.
Hmm. Yeah. So the point is we're using it so to assist us in finding out what the animal wants. Okay.
Mhm.
So rather than just making a decision,
Right.
we can actually give them, as the term is, we can give them agency
Yes.
to be able to say, I got a better idea for me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whatever that is. And
Yeah.
and when we're making decisions on an end of life, I mean, one of the big ones, of course, is do we go for euthanasia or do we
Yeah.
go natural, right?
Yeah.
Do we keep trying to get them to eat or do we not? And
Right.
what's your favorite food? Maybe,
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that we can help or get information on that will assist us and make it just better for them in that last time, right?
Absolutely. And that, those questions are so important and they're very individual and they can be very nuanced. And so, are you ready for euthanasia? Is euthanasia um, acceptable for you at this point? what kind of timing? I mean, I'm thinking about one dog I worked with who he and his person knew they were coming to the end, and the dog was fine with euthanasia and having a veterinarian assist. And in that, in that particular scenario, that was really, really appropriate. But he just wanted a few more days with his person, right? And they were doing palliative care and, pain management and all of that. And so he said yes to euthanasia, but not today. Let's have just a few more days to complete our time together. And then when the time came, he was very, very ready, as was his person. And so, in my practice, I mean, for each individual animal, there's a completely unique and individual story, right? And I'm thinking of another dog I worked with early in my practice that made such an impression on me. And, he had a quite a serious condition, and the veterinarian had recommended euthanasia quite quickly, right? Like the next day. And the person called me to have kind of a goodbye conversation with him. And he was emphatic. No, this is not the time. I am not ready. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. I can't, even as I talk about it, I don't remember ever, having such a strong, emphatic no, 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 no. So she listened to him and she canceled the appointment. They had another year together, of a lot of really beautiful quality of life. And when he finally passed, he passed on his own from something that was not related to the original condition. He was on a walk and just kind of collapsed in the park and died, right? Doing what he loved. And so, that also taught me about how much animals have the potential to understand. And not everyone does understand this is not my time to go, right? But the potential is there that they can know, wait a minute, no, we're not done yet, right? And conversely, they can know we are done, right? Please, let's end this. I'm tired. I've had enough. Or I want to fade out on my own. All of those different possibilities exist. And so when we communicate with them, we can just ask, right? We can listen to what they say. And it's not always possible for us to 100% comply with their preferences, right? In some circumstances, but we can, just having that partnership and that conversation, because I know, so many people, myself included, we struggle with that decision. We struggle with the timing. We struggle with when do we let the animal go on their own versus when do we assist, right? All of those things. When do we stop when do we stop certain kinds of care and move into palliative and hospice care? So there's so much that can be gained by just having that conversation and also helping our animals to understand our points of view as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the from I'm just going to move into the vet hospital for a second, and that is we get people that bring in animals for euthanasia, which we haven't even talked to. As in we know them, we know what's going on, but in terms of deciding on Tuesday afternoon, no, I haven't talked to them about it, right? So they turn up, okay,
Yeah.
and in some cases they turn up at a specific time because it's convenient for them in their life. So it's set up that way. But the thing about it is, and this is something that I'll say some veterinarians can get, and that is when you're presented with that and the owner signed the form, and then you go into the room, usually with a sedative to give to them so they can start the process. There were times certainly where you sort of go in and you just get this feeling that it is time, but you also sometimes get a feeling where it's like, mm, this one might not be ready.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about animal communication,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? And
Exactly.
being able to pull that in.
Yeah.
And most veterinarians wouldn't have the ability to say, is that real or not?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
really it's very difficult,
Hmm.
for I call it a left brain veterinarian to try and figure that out,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. And, and I know you've, and I've had this conversation before. I think there are more veterinarians out there who are actually able to hear and feel in that way, maybe even more than they are consciously aware of themselves. or then they
Exactly.
can admit in a professional setting. And thankfully, that's changing, right? I mean, people like you are helping to change that. I know I have more and more veterinarians and, vet techs, vet nurses coming in through my practice to learn more about communication. It is changing. There's a lot more openness, but I think still it's hard, right? And, because of the training and because
Oh,
also you have to be, retain a certain amount of neutrality so that you can support the animals and their humans, right? And, be there
exactly.
professionally in that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the thing that's changed also compared to decades ago is that we now have veterinarians that are refusing to do euthanasia, and as in on a specific one,
In
okay,
specific cases, yeah.
and I've gone through that,
Yeah.
and the most blatant one was some guy who brought in two Bassets, and it's marked for euthanasia, and I saw them come in, they look good, and the receptionist had to be the file, and he says he's booked to euthanasia, and I said, yeah, both, yeah. Says why, and she says he wouldn't say. Oh, okay. So anyway, I didn't get any sedative ready. I just went in, and got in there, and these two dogs jumping at me, and I started giving him liver treats, and said, "So, what are we doing today?" He says, "Oh, we got to, let them go." He says, "They're suffering." And I'm going, I'm missing something here. Something really big, right? And anyway, he was very evasive and wouldn't tell me, And then I just told him, I says, I can't euthanize these two. No way. And he
Yeah.
was he was pretty upset. And then ended up going out, slamming doors, all that stuff. But the thing is, I mean, that's a blatant example, but there's more subtle ones where veterinarians are now deciding that it's not time. And I think part of it is, I mean, you're looking at the physical evidence, but also getting the emotional evidence as well,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're
Exactly.
feeling it.
Feeling it. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's really good in that case. So definitely communication is going to help us, making I call when decision or if and where, home, hospital, things like that. But when we move into, and this is the harder part, I call it the difficult ones,
Yeah.
where it is suddenly on it's Wednesday morning, and all of a sudden your dog has got something really bad. It's got a bleeding tumor in the belly,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're faced with bad consequences or something like that,
Yeah.
unexpected, and all of a sudden you have to come to a decision.
Mhm.
So how can we meld those two worlds?
Yeah. I mean, I think, all of us want to have a peaceful, easy death for ourselves, for our loved ones, of all species, right? And the reality of life in bodies and life on Earth is that that does not always happen. And in those difficult kinds of situations where it's an emergency, an urgent decision, um, we can communicate. It's difficult. I think it's more difficult the more emotional shock and grief and trauma both we and perhaps the animal is in, the harder communication can be because there's just so much there, right? And so in those cases, it can be helpful if a neutral third party is available to have their input as well, right? That could be an animal communicator, it could be a veterinarian who is open in that way, and even a veterinarian who's not using animal communication, just to be able to say, there's nothing else we can do here, right? And help the client work through that decision, but also, to communicate with the animal. And I've experienced this with my own animal family more than once, unfortunately, and it's painful. But to say, we've got to let you go, right? We're going to end this, and there's nothing we can do to help your body. And to have that communication process so that they understand what's happening, right? And in most cases, they'll understand that they're feeling really sick, even if they may not have a full conception of the the veterinary details of what's going on, though some do. But then also, after the death, after the passing, whether it's natural or by euthanasia or however it happens, in those kinds of more difficult cases, it's important to remember that we can continue the communication with them after they pass. And oftentimes, that's really important, both for the animal and for the human person, to be able to kind of finish that communication process and resolve if anything needs to be resolved. And sometimes it doesn't happen right away, right? There needs to be time for both the animal and the human. But that using communication as part of the process, even after death, can be an important part of the healing and also an important part of strengthening that partnership and the relationship with the animal and their person, even after the physical body is gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can use it before and after,
Right,
and just find out, uh, yeah, how did the animal feel?
right,
What did your pet think of what the decision you made, right?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And
So
one of,
that's where the
one of the,
blame comes in,
sorry, go
right
ahead.
there. Yeah. I was gonna say that's where the blame comes in, where we blame ourselves, saying,
Yeah,
I don't know if I got it right.
right,
And
right. And we
get
can simply ask that question, right?
yeah.
And I've had so many conversations with animals who were able to show me after they left their bodies what that experience was like for them. And again, it's everyone is unique, everyone is individual. But oftentimes having that conversation and being able to communicate to their person what that was like for them and what happened in those moments as the spirit separated from the body, that can be really healing for the person as well.
Yeah. So in other words, we didn't mess that part up, did we?
Right. Exactly.
They're able to do
Exactly.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you're up against the wall and I mean, something, you've got a Doberman and all of a sudden it's stomach twisted, as we call it, it's bloated,
Yeah.
and gee, you've got a decision. And then you
Yeah.
move into, it's 11 years old. He's got a tumor somewhere, and now it's going to cost thousands of dollars with a very small chance of making it through. You start making practical decisions and such, and
Yeah.
this is the problem. As an owner, it's kind of like you're looking at all these facts. You can't do a connection to do a communication at that moment.
It could be really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not to say it's impossible, but I know even for me, I do this professionally. I've done it for a long time. When I have a crisis with one of my own animals, I have a trusted colleague and friend that I call, right? Because, and oftentimes we're hearing the same thing, but I know I have that backup because when you're so filled with emotion, and then also you have to wear both hats, right? You've got the decision making hat, the responsible human, because just the fact of life with how we live with our companion animals is that we are the ones who are most often responsible for decision making for them, right? And so it's hard to wear all those hats and to think through it all. And that's where having also a trusted veterinarian involved who can really say, okay, this is the situation. This is these are the options. This is the prognosis, and give that professional medical opinion can be so helpful also in sorting out everything.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. But the thing about this, doing the communication and getting answers and going through this process, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it nicer. We're trying to make it so it's not as hard on us and hard on our pets, right? But one of the things that always comes up is, and it marries right into it, is the grief that we feel when we lose our friends,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
And I think we can't skip over that. And communication is not a substitute for that. And the grief can go both ways, right? Sometimes people have, I think, a misperception that, well, the animals don't grieve. They're fine. They're on the other side. They're, and sometimes that is true, right? But also, animals can go through grief at the end of their life and saying goodbye to their physical experience, saying goodbye to their people. Many animals don't want to do that, right? It takes time to kind of sort that through. Some animals aren't ready, right? All of the things that can happen. And so it's important to, not just make it easier, but also to make it truthful, to make it honest, for us to be able to have those really honest, clear conversations with them. And that includes the grief, right? And a lot of times people think, oh, I need to hide my grief from my animal, especially that anticipatory grief. If we know our animal is coming to the end of life and we're going through a lot of that. Sometimes people feel, oh, I need to hide that from them. I need to not show it. I need to be strong and happy for them. And I've heard so many animals say, first of all, you can't hide it, right? Because they are so good at understanding what we're sensing and feeling, what we're going through. And secondly, they want us to be honest with them. They want us to be clear. And of course, there's the difference between that and just splattering our emotions all over them, right? That's a different kind of thing. But that honesty, that clear communication, and moving through that together and allowing them to express any grief that they have is such an important part of the process. And we can't shortchange that. And I, find sometimes in the holistic and metaphysical and animal communication worlds, there's a tendency to kind of, want to bypass the grief and go straight to love and light and, peace and beauty and, angels and all of that. And I think that we do ourselves and our animals a disservice by not really honoring that grief process. And we can do that even as we retain our awareness that they are not just their physical bodies and that they are spiritual beings and that they can and do have an existence beyond their physical bodies. But that doesn't stop the grief, nor should it, because that's a holy and healthy process that it's really important for us to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot. I mean, if you don't feel grief, you've got a problem.
Yeah,
Pure and
yeah,
simple, right? It's
exactly.
yeah, I mean if that's the case, it's like, oh, maybe you shouldn't be doing this. Like
Yeah.
but yeah, that's a normal part of the process and everyone goes through that differently.
Yes.
And the key is, especially when we're talking about animal communication and such, when people are in the grief mode, that is the time to be able to or to get an animal communicator, as in someone who can connect with your friend
Hmm. Yeah.
before or after passing.
Yeah.
And you can get some clarity and some answers on what you want to do
Yeah.
or what happened, whatever,
Yeah.
whichever direction we
Exactly.
go in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, I'll say that's probably I mean, I love all the aspects of my work, but I find that grief support and end of life, afterlife, those communications are just some of the most special that I have the privilege to do because it's really just facilitating that deeper understanding and relationship with people and their animals, and it
Mhm.
it can strengthen that bond, the bond of love and that spiritual connection that we have with our animal companions. So it can be a very precious and holy and beautiful time, as well as a difficult and heart-wrenching and time that's filled with a lot of grief and loss.
Mhm. Yeah, very much so. But animal communicators can help it make it nicer for us, can't they?
Yeah, how I view my role as an animal communicator is to translate, right? And so to facilitate those conversations and all the questions and the things we want to say to each other in those times, right? And if we're lucky, we get to have those conversations before they leave. If it's more difficult or sudden, sometimes those conversations have to happen after they leave. But it in that openness and in that honesty, that's what can create the peace and that connection and that trust that that trust in that relationship, and trust that even if the circumstances are really, really difficult, that we can still have those communications and that connection with our animals.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, the I think it's a wonderful thing that we've moved into this world of animal communicators. I met my first one, well, about 20 years ago. Yeah. And then by the time I finished practice, I think we had three or maybe four that were clients of ours at our hospital,
Uh-huh.
you know. And at one time we ended up getting three different communicators to talk to different animals over the time. We got two to talk to one cat because he was so ornery. But
That's fantastic. I mean, I just love that way of partnering, right? And more of I know the people that I've trained and in my own practice, and just out there in the world, there are more and more of those partnerships between veterinary practices
mhm,
and animal communicators, and also Reiki practitioners and other kinds of holistic healers. And
yeah,
I just think, we need all of it, right? And the more
yeah,
supports we have, for our animals, for ourselves, the stronger we are. And
mhm,
so, yeah.
yeah. Just to reflect on that, because in our practice was considered more holistic because of what we did in terms of nutrition, vaccines, and all, and treatments, whatever. But the thing is, it was still a vague line that you sometimes didn't want to cross, and that is, you're my client, you've got a dog, I've just diagnosed leukemia with it or something, right? And then I'm saying that, these are the options for treatment and such. And then I'm thinking, gee, the way this, and usually I was based on the way this person's accepting this and the turmoil that she's going through, I think talking to a communicator would be useful for her.
Yeah.
Okay. But then here I am, the veterinarian, saying, if you're having difficulty with this, you may want to talk to an animal communicator. Crossing to that line for some people is, unfortunately, they can look at the veterinarian and go, well, that's unprofessional.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Okay. Or others will endorse it and say, gee, you're really thinking about me. Thanks a lot. What's her number? What that type of thing, right?
Yeah.
It could go both ways. And I saw this in the classes I taught for veterinary assistants. There was an entire module on alternative therapies. And there was a student pretty well in every one of the classes that came up and said, I can't believe you as a veterinarian are endorsing this type of treatment. It's like, okay. So unfortunately, veterinarians are there and they keep their head down because they want to be careful,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
in practice now, so I've got a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you're helping a lot of people, to really understand and to bridge the gap. So I
Yeah,
think that's wonderful. And I
yeah,
think, like with anything, right? Change can come slowly or it can come in like big bursts and big waves, right? And I do see that I have the benefit of having had a long time in this field, and I see a difference even from when I started about 20 years ago, in the level of acceptance, even in the conventional veterinary medicine world,
yeah,
not to mention the holistic world. And I've had the privilege of, having wonderful veterinarians who, understand and support what I do, for my own animal family. And, they're out there. And it is changing, and probably not as fast as you or I would like, but, we
yeah,
just keep doing our work and keep showing up. And,
yeah.
um, you
No,
know,
yeah. Every time I do a conference, I'm hitting more people and they're getting some more ideas and they're finding out the word is options.
yeah, exactly.
That's the key. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if people want to follow up with you, you've got something for them, Nancy?
Yeah, I have a free class. It's called The Basics of Animal Communication. And if people, one of the things I feel really strongly about is that everybody has the ability to do this. So while there are people like me who are professional animal communicators who can help, especially in the situations like we've just discussed, it's important for, I think, for people to realize that they are capable of doing this themselves also. And so a huge part of my work is teaching people and training people how to remember this natural ability that we all have. And so I have an introductory class. It's called The Basics of Animal Communication. And it's a great place to start, especially for people who are newer to this, who just kind of want to find out, what is this? What does it look like? How does it work? Can I really do it? We'll have that. I think you'll have that link for people. It's a free class. It includes both a video and recorded meditation and an ebook. So there's a lot of different aspects for different kinds of learning, and love to have people that take the class and connect with me. You can also connect with me on my website,
Yeah.
nancywindheart.com.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, links is below. So if you're interested in getting into this world and finding out, can you do it? You're not going to find out if you don't sign up. So go for it. So we could do that. So thank you for being on board, Nancy.
Thank you, Jeff. It's always a pleasure to work with you, and thank you for all the great work that you're doing in educating people and helping them.
You're very welcome. Yeah, so thank you. And thank you everyone for watching. And hopefully you got just a little bit more information on communication, what it can do, why it's so useful. That's the big one. Okay. So keep learning. Watch all the other presentations. I'll catch you in that one.